Hi everyone, this is the class for Wednesday, April the 6th. Again, I'm sorry I cannot meet with you in person, but well, at least we can communicate this way. Today we're going to continue with our discussion of agricultural markets and the problematic that farmers face in Latin America. So I am going to share my screen since there is no way to interact at all. So here we go. On Monday, or the last time you saw this video, we ended up talking about, well, the most recent thing, the last thing that we talked about was the feminization of agriculture. I'll expand on this in a few minutes. But essentially, this has to do with the migration of males to other countries, mainly, or to engage males engaging in other activities that are either extra legal or illegal. The point is that female workers are readily available and they have been employed for lower wages in agriculture by many multinational corporations. Anyway, that was the last comment I made. And then we were going to move about this section. Structural constraints in agriculture. So this is a series of elements that make the agricultural sector in Latin America even more problematic for economic development and especially for the well-being of people living on rural areas. So essentially what I'm saying is the following. This is a series of comments. In the quest for developing countries, following the idea that globalization and modernization are the keys to success, engaging with technology, engaging with other countries through finance and international trade, many politicians, all the way from the president of Latin American countries and spreading out through many members of the cabinet of these presidents, all these politicians in general have seen agriculture as a declining sector with falling prices. So the idea that many people have is that, and I think this is a wrong vision. This is not the right approach. But many of these people believe that agriculture, the primary sector, is not the key to the future because many other countries have moved on to manufacturing and many others have moved on to the finance sector, the services sector. So sticking to agriculture is like staying in the past, backwards, delay, primitive, if you will. On top of that, in agriculture, the type of skills required in agriculture, I mean, you do not need to know how to read, how to operate a computer. You don't need to speak 2-3 languages, nothing. So the skill requirements are such that many politicians and leadership in many Latin American countries see farmers as something of the past. That they don't see them as part of the modern world. They don't see them as, well, the engines of modernization and growth. And number two, if you look at this, I'm highlighting here, the rural poor have little political power. And as I mentioned in class, we live in the cities, in the urban areas, with access to water, gas, electricity, the sewage system, the highway system, the hospitals and the schools and so forth. We don't see them. We don't see how the rural poor live in Latin America. They don't have any, well, many of them don't have what we have. But because we don't see them, we don't listen to them, we don't think about them, well, then they have not been able to develop some political power. I mean, some groups, like I mentioned in class, the Zapatista movement in Mexico, the coca growers in Bolivia, all of these farmers, well, had to, really become a bit more, in some cases, violent in order to get the attention and in order to get this political power. But the vast majority of the rural areas in Latin America are invisible. We don't care about it. And obviously, here is the added element. Most of the policies that are or have been implemented in Latin America are what we call centralized. What is this? What is this word telling you? Centralized means that there is typically a bureaucrat, a government officer, making decisions for things that are going to happen 300 miles away, 1,000 miles away, 2,000 miles away from the desk of this person, right? Now, here in the US, we have access to a lot of information. You have the many government agencies, for example, the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and many other Latin American countries have too. But the amount of information, the level of detail, the accuracy of the information in Latin American countries pales in comparison to what we have here in the US and other rich countries. So many of these bureaucrats, government officers making decisions about what's happening really, really, really far away are not really connected with what's going on there. So they are making pronouncements, they are passing policies and approving processes that really do not match the reality on the ground that far away. So this is a problem with centralized governments, this disconnect between the reality on the ground and the plans on the desk of the politicians. And this is true for domestic policies and also for policies implemented by the IMF, the World Bank. And this is why many people in rural areas don't like them, because they say, do you understand what's happening here? Why are you asking me to do this? This is not reasonable. Implementing this is just not feasible, right? And then here we have another problem. Credit. By nature, or by definition, or the very same nature of agriculture, agricultural markets are very risky. So think about this. You have the weather. You have, in some cases, monsoons, hurricanes, or in some other cases, droughts, or really cold temperatures. All of these things, floods, fires, all of these things that come from nature make agriculture a very risky enterprise. Therefore, insurance and credit are very, very, very expensive. And typically, these type of financial aid and financial instruments are not available to everybody. Typically, they are only available for those that have all the necessary elements for producing collateral in case of a disaster. So if you have a title of property, if you have some other properties that a bank or the insurance company can use to recover the damages, that's fine. But 90+% of the farmers in Latin America don't have that, right? So credit has been typically directed to specific crops and very concentrated in the hands of elite group, a very privileged group of people. So this is what I'm trying to say here. Missing or incomplete markets for products, labor, and credit, especially credit. Because think about this. The activities in ag require a significant amount of investment. I'm talking about not just the labor, but you need the seeds, you need sometimes machinery, you need fertilizers, and you need to keep, well, the plants healthy, and sometimes you need irrigation. So this all requires a significant amount of investment, but the return, you don't see any return until harvesting time. So this is why it's important to have access to credit. Without credit, many farmers have no ability to grow stuff, right? And the second one, I talked already about the high risk in terms of crop failure, right? And pricing. This is another element that introduces a significant amount of risk in agriculture. So think about this. It's a very intuitive idea. And there are models, more formal economic models that I am not going to explain here now. But think about this. This is the pure intuition. If in a given community, everybody, for example, decides to plant and grow beans, and then you have suddenly a huge amount of beans growing, what do you think is going to happen to the price of beans? Well, the price of beans is going to decline because the supply is so large that, you know, it can be flooding the market with beans, dropping the price down, right? Or if everybody decides to grow onions or oranges or bananas, or not everybody, but a significant amount of people, because normally you can decide what to do with your land. I mean, if the land is appropriate for different crops. But normally what farmers do is that, okay, they look at the prices and they say, oh, this year the price of beans is high. I am going to plant and harvest beans again this season because it's going to happen again. Well, if everybody is thinking the same thing and everybody is growing beans, the price of beans goes down. So your calculations for the recovery of your investment may be really, really wrong because you are expecting, I don't know, a given amount of price per pound or per kilogram, and then suddenly the price is cut by half or by 2/3, then recovering the investment is going to be challenging for you. Yeah. So agriculture, very risky, very risky. Crop failure because of weather, and pricing because of the fluctuations due to market forces, supply and demand. In addition to all that, we already talked about the property rights. The idea here is that many farmers in Latin America do not have titles of property. And when you don't have a title of property, number one, you cannot sell the land because you cannot prove that that land legally belongs to you. But number two, when you go to the bank to request a credit line, they are going to ask you for some sort of collateral. And normally the collateral is the land itself. But if you don't have a title of property, the bank is going to say, I am sorry, we cannot give you any money because you cannot prove that you are the legal owner of this land. Therefore, in the absence of these clearly defined property rights, let me highlight this part here on the screen. In these circumstances, what happens is that the formal credit is not accessible to farmers, and therefore they have to rely on sharks, people making loans at a very, very high interest rate, and normally with very aggressive practices if you don't pay, right? So this introduces another distortion for poor farmers because now, even if they have the same access to technology, even if they have the same access to seeds and fertilizers, the cost of the credit for the poor farmers is way, way higher than for the multinational corporations that have all this documentation in order. So with this is what I'm saying. In Latin American countries, it's very common to see what we call segmented credit markets, which basically means that different borrowing people are charged different prices for the same service. So if you need to borrow $1 million and you're a multinational corporation, the interest rate may be 5%. But if you're a poor farmer and you need to borrow $1 million, the shark is going to charge them 25% of interest. You see the disparity right there? The only difference is that, well, the poor farmer doesn't have the title of property. Now, how is that multinational corporations do? Well, again, the power they have is such that they can either buy the land from other rich people or borrow the name of rich people that have titles of property and use those documents in order to access these. Or in some cases, the multinational corporations is so large and so big, they don't need access to credit. They can just tap into their own resources and make the investment, right? So in this case, the interest rate is 0, which is even better than 10%. Okay, so this is just one comment to wrap this area. Those with no land rights have no access to formal credit markets intermediated by the state and private institutions. So they don't have access to the subsidies, to enjoy low interest rates, nothing. Instead, they have to rely on friends, if you are lucky, to have a rich friend, landowners, or worse, professional money lenders. I call them sharks, my bad, but you know what I mean. People that, for a living, they make loans for really, really high interest rates, totally outside the formal banking system. Yeah. Anyway, so what do we do now? So what are the options to solve the problems in agriculture in Latin America? So what are the alternatives? What can be done? Because obviously, something needs to be done. I think by now, after 2 days or 1.5 days of talking about the problems, you realize that it's a big mess. Agriculture in Latin America, it's a mess, right? So what are the policy options to fix these problems? Well, first of all, you have the typical neoliberal recommendations, and you can see the solutions here, which makes sense. Securing transferable property rights. We need to figure out a way to make sure that whoever is the rightful owner of the land has access to a title of property, and therefore they can sell the land and they can access credit. Also, we need to create the legal framework such that any contract, like when you're selling or buying, can be enforceable. So we need more regulation in the sense that if you want to acquire or sell land, you can do so within the legal framework. You don't have to, rely on, the reputation of the person buying it or selling it. There has to be some sort of legal authority, official entity overseeing these transactions. Obviously, look at this. The neoliberal policy recommends the removal of subsidies. And of course, once again, this is the typical example of why people in Latin America don't like these options because, you in the US, they say, you guys in Europe, they say, are preaching free agricultural markets, free from government intervention, no subsidies, no taxes, but you don't practice what you preach. In the US, you guys, I hope you guys saw the video that I recommended on Monday. It's on Canvas. So the US is preaching free trade, free agricultural markets, but we don't preach that. We don't practice that. So this subsidy removal is kind of contention because it's not totally agreed upon. And of course, they propose the implementation of market-based initiatives rather than command and control regulations from a centralized authority that has no clue what's going on the ground. And I tend to agree with this. Adopting green accounting methods and peer monitoring. Well, again, this is more modern. Sustainability is the word now. The green accounting is essentially sustainability. Co-signing to reduce risk. Yeah, okay. And here it is. Push to open to international trade. So rich economies just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Free trade, international trade, no barriers, no tariffs, no subsidies, right? So they are never going to stop. And that's fine. That's totally fine. In some countries, it works. Then the new institutionalist, which again is part of the neoliberal, or kind of an added element to the neoliberal agenda, is that they want to focus on the high transaction cost. So they want to figure out a way to eliminate the professional money lenders. They want to figure out a way to create a more affordable insurance schemes, credit programs. The idea is to reduce the transaction cost, because the transaction cost can be so high that are unreachable by many people. The neo-structuralist, this is an interesting take. They say policy must take into account classes and gender of the market actors. In other words, the market structure matters, especially when considering the power of elites to influence policy outcomes. So there have been many programs like, for example, where they say, if you can prove that you come from indigenous community in the Andean mountains of Bolivia or Peru, we are going to give you a special access to this particular line of credit or this particular program. Or if you're a female, you are going to be accessing such and such and such. So the idea is to tailor, to be more specific and more intentional about helping out underserved communities, right? And I think that's a good idea. That's a good idea, because remember, the idea is not that everybody is equal. The idea is to level the playing field. We don't want to give everybody the same amount of income. We want to give everybody the same amount of opportunities. And right now, many of these underserved, underrepresented communities in Latin America do not have the same access to these opportunities that, elite members of society do. And then land reform. This is an essential ingredient. And again, land reform is just another way to say who owns what legally. And in many countries, including Mexico, by the way, this is a huge problem and has been a huge problem for centuries, really. I honestly don't know how to solve this, because as I mentioned in class, there are some places where you have 2-3 owners for the same piece of land, but none of them has a title of property. So it's just really, really messy to figure out these things. I mean, we're making progress, especially in, again, countries like Mexico, but in some other places, for example, let me give you an idea, just to the level of complexity of this. Venezuela has territorial disputes with one of the Guyanas, one of the neighbor countries. So it's not just about internal disputes for territory. We're talking about disputes among countries. No, this river belongs to me. No, that mountain belongs to me. It's still, in the map, in the official geography that we see on Google or whatever, you can see the line and it says, okay, from here south is Venezuela, from here and north is Suriname, or one of the Guyanas. And, that we have to do it somehow. But if you go there, you're going to discover that it's not clear who is responsible for what. And there is constant dispute between, well, in this case, again, Venezuela and Guyana, but the same happens in the border in Ecuador, Bolivia, and other countries around there. So land reform is key. All right, So some important questions. What is the optimal size of farm? And I don't have answers to this question. I'm just, throwing this to you so that you can think about this. What is the optimal size of farms? Do we want lots and lots of small farms, or we need a relatively smaller number of large corporate farms? Will small farmers have access to credit and new technology? Well, probably not, because as by definition, when they're small, well, they don't partake in the benefits that multinational corporations do. And whose land should be taken, and what kind of compensation should be offered? So this is the really important question I wanted to get to. In many Latin American countries, there is another problem. Many rich people acquire land, but they don't use it. It's totally idle. They think of this land as part of their wealth. And of course, many of these acres of land are really, really valuable as a piece of land, but also as a piece of agriculture. The point is that millions and millions of acres are in the hands of very, very rich people, but they are wasted. They are not being used. It's idle land. And in the mind of governments, especially the federal and state governments, this is really a true waste of resources. So there have been some attempts to through these land reform mechanisms and some legal resources, so that they can take away from the land from the hands of the elites and give it to other people that are actually going to work the land and make it a productive use. Because we're talking about fertile, very high quality soil, lots of nutrients being wasted, right? So the idea through these processes is to take the land away from the hands of these guys and give it to somebody that's going to work on them. Obviously, the politics and the level of corruption and in some cases violence can be really, really bad. But it's an interesting thought. Whose land should be taken and what kind of compensation should be offered? Because it's not that they are going to take it away without giving them anything. It's similar to what we have here. You are going to hopefully be familiar with this idea, the eminent domain. So the highway, the high-speed rail is cutting across the Central Valley, and many farmers are saying, "What? No, this is my farm." Well, this is for the common good. We are going to buy your land, or at least a section of your land. So it's not that they're going to take it away and just kick you out. There has to be some sort of compensation. The question is how much, who is going to pay for it, and so forth. Well, it's the same idea in Latin American countries through this land reform. Again, I don't know the answers to these questions, but they are important ones. Yeah. All right. Let's see. In some countries, this land reform has already begun and is in the process of taking place. And well, we talk about this already, but let me explain very quickly these four. Technology gap. Farmers, once again, lack access to irrigation, fertilizing, pesticides, bio seeds, biotechnology in general, and that's just going to put them in a total disadvantage. Then these two are hand in hand. As I mentioned before, really, really large multinational corporations are taking over the land and the labor in many Latin American regions, which produces this wage scheme, a worker employer relationship. So rather than the farmers owning the land, working the land, and being the owners of the products of the land, they become employees of multinational corporations and therefore do not longer own what the land is producing. And finally, the feminization of rural wage labor, which I already explained. Okay, so here is the challenge, the real challenge for Latin American agriculture, at least the way I see it. We need to create equitable, is equitable, not is you know, equality is not the same as equity, right? Equitable pathways to raising farm productivity. Yes, we need to increase productivity of the land in Latin America, but this requires, get this, human capital development, more skills, health, education, infrastructure, not just irrigation systems, but highways and railroad systems to take the stuff out to other regions on other countries, and more importantly, community-based decision-making. We need to decentralize policy implementation. Bureaucrats in the capital of the country making decisions as to what happens in rural areas 3,000 miles away doesn't work. Oh, well, but he's an engineer in, I don't know, has a PhD in agriculture. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have to be connected with what's going on the ground. You need to know the actors. You need to know the families. You need to know the soil, the weather, the history, the institutions in the locality in order to produce sound, reasonable, effective policies. Is this happening? Not yet. I mean, at some extent, some countries are in the process of decentralizing this policy decision making, but it's hard because think about this. Whoever is controlling this has a lot of power, a lot of access, a significant amount of access to a lot of resources. They don't want to let it go. They want to keep controlling. They want to keep their hands on the resources. So this decentralization process is a really painful one and a long one that in some cases it's just not happening, at least not yet. Yeah. So the key challenge again is this: how to ensure that policy initiatives to raise productivity in the rural sector are consistent with programs to improve the incomes of the rural poor. So how do we make sure that the land becomes more productive, again, through technology, infrastructure, and all of these beautiful things, while at the same time, the benefits of that increase in productivity is spread out in an equitable way among the rural poor, right? So we don't want to increase productivity and expand and grow the agricultural sector if the benefits are going to be are going to end up in the pockets of a few members of the elite. No, we want, yes, we do want to expand productivity, we want to grow agriculture, but the benefits should be more equally distributed, improving the income of the rural poor. Now, here is a story that, I don't know, I'm going to tell you the story, or at least the idea, because I don't have names. Even if I did, I wouldn't give them to you. But the story goes like this. The level of corruption and the level of abandonment and the level of the lack of understanding of the problems and the solutions has produced the following, guys. I can take you to some towns in Mexico where you go there and you see that the church is really nice, that the school is really nice, that the highway system or the roads connecting that particular town is in really good shape. And then you ask, man, how did you do that? You have a very effective government here, right? Like, and they start laughing, like, what are you talking about? No, the government doesn't care about us. Like, then what happened? What's going on here, guys? I mean, I hope you're paying attention to this, because I'm gonna share something with you that I think is gonna surprise some of you, at least some of you. So the story that I tell goes something like this. Well, many years ago, we were in troubles because the government didn't care for us and still doesn't care today. They didn't build the school, they didn't build the roads, they didn't help us to do anything. The clinic, nothing. But one day, a group of people came on these trucks, and they were carrying weapons, and they told us, well, guys, what are you growing here? Corn, beans, whatever. We have a proposition for you. We want you to switch your crops. What do you mean? Oh, no, you don't have to ask many questions. We are going to give you the seeds, but in addition to that, we are going to give you anything you need. You need irrigation, you need fertilizers, we'll give it to you. Like, what? Oh, yeah. But not only that, what do you need in the community? You need a school, you need a clinic, we'll build it for you. In fact, because we need to take the harvest to some distance away from here, we are actually going to build a tarmac for our planes. So you understand where I'm going with this? We're talking about narco traffic. These people are becoming so powerful that they can come to these remote localities, and then they literally take over, gaining the trust of the people in town by, well, giving them what the government is not giving them. Public services like schools, clinics, well, even the church in some cases, a basketball court, lighting, anything they need, as long as they, well, play the game. So it's incredible, because the gaps, the vacuums generated by the inefficiencies of state and local governments is filled, or has been in some cases, by the narco traffic activities. Very, very interesting phenomena. Now, when you see that, this is how, for example, some of you probably know the name of Chapo Guzman, right? I mean, this is the typical example. This guy was like a superstar. Many people actually like him because he was, I don't know if I'm going to use the quotation, generous, in the sense that, he was making so much money that he could spread the money around in such a way that they will protect him, hide him, help him to build tunnels to escape, and all the stories that you have seen in the news, throwing parties, and everybody was welcome for free, as long as, again, they were part of the game. Very, very interesting situation, guys. And again, this is the story of Mexico, but in Colombia, thinking about growing the stuff is the same idea. In Bolivia, in Peru, in Ecuador, it's the same story. And again, I don't know how to solve this. I'm just telling you what's going on and how it works, and that's it. You give, it's like one of those cases that I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and everybody's fine, but they are totally outside the legal system. Yep. Anyway, let me finish. And again, I wish we could interact and have some reaction, guys. We'll save that for later. Let's see. Here is another interesting idea that Brazil is leading the charge. This is sustainable fuel, ethanol. So a biofuel, which is alternative to gasoline that comes from oil. And in Brazil, let me see, Brazil and the US alone account for 90% of all ethanol production. In fact, if you go to some places in Brazil, the engine, the combustion engine, here in the US, you cannot just put 100% ethanol. You have to mix the ethanol with gasoline in order for the combustion engine to work. But in some engines in Brazil, you can actually use 100% ethanol. So you have a picture there. I don't even know where I took this picture from, but there are gas pumps that I shouldn't call them gas pumps. They should be ethanol pumps, where all you put in your car is 100% ethanol. And some of this is coming from potato, some of this is coming from corn, some of this is coming from many other, guess what, agricultural stuff. And that's the key element of this example. If Latin America has a lot of agricultural stuff, and we can figure out a way to process, not sell the potatoes, not sell the corn, but to process it internally to produce something else, remember the value added, something else like ethanol, particularly if this is going to be an efficient and effective substitute for oil or gasoline in this case, is a really, really good idea. Here's another one, sugarcane. Sugarcane is also used to produce ethanol. As long as there is this decomposition that you can produce alcohol or ethanol, really, you can do it. The point is that there are some countries, and Brazil is leading the charge, figuring out this type of alternative uses for agricultural stuff. Very successful, especially now that the price of oil is so high and the price of gasoline is so high. Ethanol is becoming even more and more interesting. The technology is there. Not everybody is capable yet of doing this, at least at a reasonable price. But I expect this to be more common over time, and more and more and more. Of course, this is competing with the electric cars, right? And this is why you don't see these ethanol stories anymore, or at least not as much as they used to, like 10, 15 years ago. But in the case of Latin America, especially if the cars are very expensive for the battery or the engine or a combination of factors, maybe ethanol could be the solution for Latin America. Latin America doesn't have to follow the rest of the world. I mean, they can set their own technologies. They can set their own indigenous practices. And this could be one of them. This could be one of them. Anyway, the next section is human resource development. I am going to start this until next class, because remember, we are supposed to cover these 23 pages in 5 or 6 classes. So I'm going to stop here. Actually, let me stop sharing my screen. I'm going to stop here. Sorry, I know I talk and you can't. You just listen. But I'm going to cut this a bit short. There is no point in me talking if you are already, distracted or tired like I am. So I will see you next class, guys, for Friday. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you shortly. Bye.